had a really strong game offensively. Just what can you say about getting an opportunity and capitalizing like you did?
Well, I know my name could be called at any time, Whenever my name is called, I look at myself on the lineup, and, I'm ready, locked in at all times.
Yes, and you actually had a great game at the plate. You had the mistake not touching home, and I guess Dave thought you should have gotten a third when you hit a double, and it looked like you lost track of the outs in the field. Were you just kind of overhyped for this game after the suspension, or kind of what happened?
No, I just had a mental error here or there. You just got to learn from it. You're going to make mistakes on the field and off the field, but the main thing is you don't make the same mistake twice, and you just keep moving forward.
And where you peeled off instead of going?
I thought the ball had gotten caught at the track, which I was wrong, and then kind of took 2 steps off and then got passed by, I think it was Kinley.
About your game overall, because then you go 3 for 4 and a home run and double. Just how'd you feel about the way you came back from the suspension?
Just felt like another game, just good approach at the plate, drove the ball well.
How tough was it sitting out your first game?
It was a little different, but, it's the way it is here at school. No matter what, someone's going to fill your spot if you're not there, and obviously you could tell they're really good as a team that day and took care of business even when I'm not there.
You said you lifted, but then you had to.
Welcome in. It's our Wednesday edition of On the Hill with Pat Jenkins Sports Talk Radio, brought to you each and every day here on KDSJ 479, Monday through Friday from 1 to 2 p.m. And we came in with open audio from Heston Kerstad, true freshman, Curtis Washington, Arkansas's lopsided win yesterday in Baum Walker Stadium over Northwestern Louisiana, 19-2. Game was called after in the 8th inning due to the weather. I believe they had some lightning going on, Demetrius, in the area. So the game, or just torrential rain. I believe there was some hail, something of that weather. I know Mother Nature had something to do with that. But I want to bring in my co-host and producer, Demetrius Demigod, but you guys know him as my home guy. What's going on, my man?
What's happening, man?
Talk about it. Arkansas still hadn't found a hit. Assistant coaches. We're hearing rumors some might be in the fold. Football's coming up. SEC caravan. We're gonna have on some more people as we're on our bus, Demetrius, and you know what we do on our bus when we get on that caravan. We're gonna take a trip down to Knoxville. What are gonna be some things that you're gonna be interested in hearing from Blake Topmeyer of the Knoxville News Centennial, as we're gonna have him up momentarily about this program under Jeremy Pruitt in year 2.
Really just to see what the off season's really been like. I think a lot of people had higher expectations for Tennessee last year, and I think going into year 2, they're really going to expect a lot. We know there was a couple of Arkansas recruits that were getting recruited to Arkansas with the Brett Bielema era that's at Tennessee right now. So I'm eager to really see how he turns out. I know he had an injury this offseason, so I'm really eager to see how he bounced back.
We'll also get back on the bus and make another trip to another Como, Columbia, Missouri, where we're going to talk Tigers with Cameron T of the Columbian Tribune. Demetrius, what's up with the Tigers? What are you going to be wanting to figure out about Coach Odom? I believe this is year 3 under Coach Odom. What's more interesting to you up there in Mizzou?
Really just to see Kelly Bryant, and really just to see how hungry this team is. We know they really won't have a postseason this year.
Kelly Bryant. I knew that. Kelly, why? Why Kelly Bryant?
I mean, I think that he's the storyline of Missouri when you're talking about Missouri football right now. So, like I said, just really just see how Kelly Bryant plays, knowing he won't have a postseason. We know they went on the suspension due to something academically happened. But I know I'm really just eager to see. I know that big Missouri game that we have at the end of the year, that Missouri line battle rivalry. I know that's going to be a good one. There's like I said, 2 former Arkansas recruits that are now on the Missouri Tigers, and I think it's just going to be it's going to be a feistier game than I think we've seen in previous years, and I think there's going to be somewhat of a rivalry building type of feel to this year's battle rivalry game.
And throw a little extra nugget in there, D. Bobby Petrino, former Arkansas football head football coach, is the offensive quarterbacks coach there at the University of Missouri for Barry Odom. So just a little extra incentive, extra little fire thrown on. So, that game in Little Rock, last game of the season, ought to make for quite the interesting situation. I'm pretty sure you and I will be down. See, you get field level, and I'm kind of jealous about that. We might have to switch that up there this year. I might have to go down to the field.
Nah, I'm not giving up my field pass, man. I went through too much to get it, bro. I really did.
People just don't know in the media what we went through to get what we got. But we got it, and we're going to hop on our bus because I know y'all ready to ride. Heading up to Knoxville to catch up with Blake Topmeyer of the Knoxville News Centennial. Time to talk balls. It's on the hill with Pat Jenkins on KDSJ 479. Holla in a bit. Hey everyone, it's Pat Jenkins here of OTH. That's right, on the hill with Pat Jenkins, Sports Talk Radio. We come to you each and every day here, Monday through Friday, from 1 to 2 on KDSJ 479. Be sure and tune in if you want to hear about SEC and the Arkansas Razorbacks. It's OTH. Holla.
We made it with what guys should be able to execute. Probably wasn't near as many mental errors probably as we've had in previous practices. So not any guys turning pressures loose or receivers not running the correct route. So it gave the offense a little better opportunity to have some success. I think we've really got to shore up our offensive line up front. We need to play with a little lower pad level. We've got to be able to run the football to have success in this league. And we got to play with a little better body angles. We got some guys who didn't participate today. We got some guys that are coming in. So we've got to create a lot of competition up front. We need to improve in that area. Same thing with the tight end position. We've got to get some guys that can win in the C area, can flex out and beat safeties and linebackers. You got to create some depth there. From a quarterback position, I felt like that, we probably looked at the rush a little bit too much there early on, held the ball, all of them. It's 100% if you don't leave the ball in the field of play. You're not going to catch it. So a couple of times we had some one-on-one shots down the field early on that we threw the ball out of bounds, and we don't need to do that because we got some playmakers at wide receiver. We need to keep the ball in play. But I thought as the ones went, they started taking a little bit what they were getting.
Hey everyone, it's Pat Jenkins here of OTH. That's right, on the hill with Pat Jenkins, Sports Talk Radio. We come to you each and every day here, Monday through Friday, from 1 to 2 on KDSJ 479. Be sure and tune in if you want to hear about SEC and the Arkansas Razorbacks. It's OTH. Holla. Welcome in. It's our Wednesday edition of On the Hill with Pat Jenkins Sports Talk Radio as we come to you live each and every day here on KDSJ 479, Monday through Friday from 1 to 2 p.m. And we told you on Monday we were getting on our bus, we had a full tank of gas, and we were going to do our caravan throughout the SEC because it just means more. And today it stopped in Knoxville, Tennessee, where we caught up with our good buddy, Blake Topmeyer of the Knoxville News Sentinel. Blake, welcome to the Hill, my man.
Hey, thanks a lot, Pat.
Get off into this, Jeremy Pruitt, year 2. What's in your opinion? What did you take from year 2 spring ball heading in to fall camp?
I feel like Pruitt's settled into the job a little bit. I think he's more comfortable in the head coaching role, and we see this so many times with first-time head coaches. They come in year 1, and they're a little bit. kind of control freaks, really. They're kind of afraid to let anybody do their jobs, and I think Pruitt encountered that in year one. I think he tried to keep everything within his control, and I think he's learned that usually doesn't work out so well. And so I really like what he's done this offseason. He brought in Jim Chaney as the offensive coordinator. Of course, Jim Chaney, obviously a veteran. You know him well from his time at Arkansas, and
Right.
he really made Chaney the CEO of the offense, and Pruitt has been hands off with the offense pretty much. And then defensively, he brought in Derek Ansley to be his defensive coordinator, and Pruitt is comfortable with Ansley from their history working together at Alabama.
Right.
And so Pruitt turned over defensive play calling to Ansley, whereas last year Pruitt called the defense. Even though he had a defensive coordinator, Pruitt called the defense. And so I really just think that's a smart, mature approach, and it shows me that he's maybe settled into the job a little bit more here in year two.
When you look at the offense under Jim Chaney, he inherits an offense, that it was a little hit and miss. Could have gotten better. A lot of talent coming back. What have you seen under Jim Chaney offensively that maybe you didn't see under the previous offensive staff?
Well, I think one thing is that Jared Garantano feels really comfortable with Jim Chaney. On the downside is the fact that Garantano is working with his fourth offensive coordinator in as many years. On the upside is he's really hit it off with Chaney. I think Chaney has sort of boosted Garantano's confidence and moxie a little bit by putting more on his shoulders. Last year, to hear Garantano tell it, there really wasn't a lot within his control in terms of pre-snap reads and decisions. That all that stuff was kind of taken out of his hands, and it's put back in his control this year. Which some would say, okay, well that makes his life harder. But I think Garantano says it makes his life easier because he has the power to make adjustments pre-snap if there's something he doesn't like and change into something else. And I think the ongoing question mark for this offense is the offensive line. That's been the biggest red flag for this unit for 2 years running now. And I still have a lot of questions that whether this line's going to be much better this year. And if that line's not better, it's hard to think the offense is going to be much better as a whole.
When you look at the running back position, how do you guys stack up? Is Coach Pruitt, feeling comfortable about 1, 2, maybe 3 deep at that position, or is that's still a position yet to be developed?
Yeah, I think at all the skill positions, Tennessee is really well set up. You got the running back spot with Ty Chandler. He's kind of a big play threat. He's a speedy guy. You can use him in the pass game. When he was on the field last year, he had some big moments. He had 3 games where he barely played because of injuries. And so the key thing will be keeping him healthy this year. Behind him, they got 3 guys, Tim Jordan, Jeremy Banks, and Eric Gray, a freshman, who are all competing to be the number 2 guy. Banks is the one that's probably most different from Chandler in that he's sort of a between-the-tackle power back. Jordan is kind of a hybrid between the two, and then Eric Gray is more similar to Chandler in that he's kind of a speedy, shifty guy who can hurt you in the passing game as well. And then you look at the wide receiver position, and Tennessee really brings everything back in terms of wide receivers and tight ends. They only lost 1 guy at either of those positions who caught a pass last year. So they're pretty much bringing back all their production. They got veterans at the wide receiver position, Marquez Callaway, Josh Palmer, and Jawan Jennings. All those guys are juniors or seniors. And then they got Dominic Wood-Anderson at the tight end position. He's in year 2 after being a junior college transfer, so he's an upperclassman as well. Garantano feels comfortable with all those guys, and I think that's the best thing that Tennessee's offense has going for him is just how comfortable their quarterback feels with the guys he's throwing the ball to.
When you look at this team defensively, the one thing that has always stood out to me, and it goes back several years, is the Butch Jones era. They were able to recruit a lot of big-time defensive talent. A lot of that talent has gone into the maturation process in year 2 under Coach Pruitt, in particular the defensive line. Talk about the job Coach Rocker and that group has been able to put together, and how strong can they be for this 2019 season?
I think the back eight for Tennessee will be pretty good. They bring back a lot of guys in that unit. Of course, they had two freshman cornerbacks last year that both played pretty well, Bryce Thompson and Alontae Taylor. And, those guys are back now, sophomores. They got a veteran safety in Nigel Warrior. And then they got some veterans in the linebacking core as well, and Daniel Batuli and Darrell Taylor. I mean, all those guys are solid players. I don't know if there's any great players in that back eight, but there's a lot of solid players, guys that, would be playing on most SEC teams. The question mark for me is the defensive line. Tennessee graduated all three of its starters from the defensive line last year. And so you're going to have fresh faces and guys that really just didn't play much at all, because those seniors last year played so many snaps up front. Normally defensive line's a position where you're usually balancing the snaps pretty well between 7 or 8 guys. Last year, Tennessee just didn't feel like they had that depth. They leaned on their seniors so much, and where that leaves them this year is you don't have guys with a lot of experience. Emmett Gooden is the exception. He's a junior college transfer who played a lot last year at nose tackle, and he'll slide in to a starting role. But outside of him, there's not a lot of things you can hang your hat on the defensive line, and I think that's something they need to continue to develop.
Talking with Blake Topmeyer of the Knoxville News Sentinel. Blake, I want to also talk to you about Jeremy Pruitt. We've always known Jeremy to be a very highly respected recruiter everywhere he's been: Florida State, Alabama, Georgia, and now at Tennessee. Talk about the talent upgrade that you guys have been able to see with this being really his second class that he's brought in. Talk about that, and how does that look going toward the future?
I think he had a solid 2019 class. I think in most of the rankings it was top 15, but it was middle of the pack in the SEC, and of course that's a challenge in recruiting in the SEC. You can have a top 15 class nationally and only be 6th or 7th in your own league. But he did close well. They got Henry To'oto'o in the February period, and he was a guy that Alabama and Washington were in on, so a couple top programs there, and Tennessee won his services, and they got a couple 5-star offensive tackles, which I think are going to be vital for Tennessee this season. Right. And Wanya Morris and Darnell Wright. I think you could see both those freshmen starting at offensive tackle. And they got another 4-star linebacker who I think will contribute this year in Quavaris Crouch. So they got a handful of guys that I think can be contributors and really have to be in year one. But I do think that the expectation is for the recruiting to take another step up in 2020 because, again, like I said, the reality is a top 15 class in the SEC may only rank middle of the pack in your league. And, so if Tennessee wants to be making strides, it really probably needs a top 5 or top 10 class coming up.
We've got about 2 minutes left in our segment, and I want to ask you a real quick question. To me, it seems like this year, there's going to be 4 teams that are going to stand out when we get to August and fall camp, with that being Georgia, Alabama, LSU, and probably Texas A&M, those being, those elite 4. After that, you throw those other 8 or other 9 teams or so in there, 10 teams. How do you see the SEC shaking up? Is this to be a real competitive conference after we talk about those 4 teams? Is that what you're seeing, Blake?
Well, I think you're going to have some of those teams, like you mentioned, sort of separate themselves from the top. And then I think what you're going to have is about 10 teams where you don't see a lot of difference in. Right. And so the question is, does that make the league really strong, or just a lot of parity? I suppose it depends on how you look at it. I don't think the league is as strong as it was a handful of years ago, when you had probably about 6-8 teams that were really dominant and were kind of interchangeable from week to week. Now I do feel like you got kind of that cream rising to the top, and it's more of a struggle to slide in that middle tier behind them. And but the jump can be made. I mean, we saw Florida last year, just how from one year to the next, how you could go from being not a very good team to being one of the conference's best. And Florida closed well last year. with that bowl win over Michigan. So I'm curious to see what kind of momentum they can make. Can they get up to Georgia's level here in year 2 of Dan Mullen? And then you hit on Texas A&M. I really think they've got a lot of momentum, and I'll be curious to see, whether they can try to close the gap on Alabama. But I do think beyond this top handful of teams, you got about 9 to 10 teams that there's not a whole lot separating them.
Yeah, as always, my man, love having you on. We'll catch up soon, but as always, thanks for taking time out here on OTH, Blake.
Hey, sounds good. Thanks for having me on, Pat.
That was Blake Topmeyer of the Knoxville News Sentinel. Demetrius, I always got to get your take. You're the big SEC football guy. People just don't know the talks that we have riding to Media Day and from Media Day. And every stop there in between once the season gets started about the SEC. And when you hear Blake, as we've heard Blake talk about his prior days at Missouri and going to Tennessee, he's been in the SEC quite a bit. What are what's your general take from what you've heard from Blake in regards to Jeremy Pruitt and the Tennessee Vols in year 2?
I think this is going to kind of be the telltale year into whether he's going to be there long-term or short-term. I think, he said something that was very important. He said, although we were, 15th in the country in recruiting, we were only 8th in the league or something like that. They were only middle of the pack. And I think that's interesting because we all know in the SEC you're competing with Alabama, and they have national championships. And so does Tennessee. Tennessee has tradition as well. So I think in doing that, I hope they turn that corner, because I think this is going to be a crucial year, especially with guys like Jimbo Fisher coming into the league. We see Vanderbilt kind of making that upcoming climb to where they're not at the bottom of the pack, but they're not at the middle of the pack either. We're starting to see the Kentuckys kind of come along. So I think, within these 1 or 2 next years, one of these first-year head coaches are really going to make a name for themselves. So these guys that's kind of really been in the league 2 to 3 years, which is kind of what you would see as a veteran in the SEC right now, which is crazy because usually coaches have been here, 12-plus years and 8 to 12 years. So it's just interesting to see so many new coaches around the SEC.
I totally agree. SEC Media Day, to me, will be one of the more exciting events to cover for me since I've been in the coverage of covering this great conference. I'm eager to see, like I said, I mentioned those 4 teams, and I think everyone listening and ourselves here in the studio would agree that Alabama, Georgia, A&M, and LSU, talent-wise this year, should be the elite 4 teams. And you notice there's a common denominator. 3 of those teams are in the SEC West. All 3 of those teams, and all 4 of those teams have recruited at a very high level. It looks like for the next 3 to 5 years, they're going to be the teams in which the standard, like the Arkansas and the Kentuckys and Tennessees and Vanderbilts and Auburns and Ole Misses and Mississippi States, Missouris, those type of teams will try to recruit to the level that those 4 teams I feel are going to recruit to. And it's only going to get better. As we always say, Demetrius, we see it every time when we get the SEC Media Days. That slogan, it rings so loud and so true. In particular, especially in football, it means more. It just means more in the SEC. But time to hop on the bus. Our work's done here in Knoxville, so we're getting back on and heading down to our next stop, Columbia, Missouri, where we talk with Cameron Teague of the Columbia Tribune. It's On the Hill with Pat Jenkins on KDSJ 479. Back in a bit.
The biggest gains have been made?
Well, a lot of different areas in our opinions we've improved every day that we've had an opportunity to practice, and we've learned a lot about our team, the makeup of kind of how we approach each practice and the situations of practice, how you script them. The guys have embraced that, and we've got better and we've moved forward. I think that our offensive line, the ability to protect the passer and then run the ball, they've made great progress. Brad and that side of the ball
with Derek, the things that we're getting a couple of new linemen ready to go at the left guard position and the right tackle, but they've done a great job on the competition has been awesome. And then you look at some of the new receivers, but also the things and all the number of moving parts that we've got coming back. The challenge is to get those guys with that experience to play better than they did last year, and I feel like we're in that position right now.
There's so much development that happens in spring camp. Is there anybody that's caught your eye where you're like, that guy's made some strides here the last 6 weeks?
Well, a number of guys. Look at a guy that we're really leaning on heavily is Larry Roundtree. But, he's a 1,200-yard rusher in our conference last year and had a really good year. But I think he's had a better spring than he did at any point last year. So, and then on the defensive side, Nick Bolton that stepped in where Therese Hall played last year has had a great spring. He's really going to be a guy that's going to have to play a lot of snaps for us, and he's done well putting himself in position to kind of take over that lead spot.
Leadership-wise, too, I mean, this is the time of year where you develop new leaders. The old senior class is gone, and I'll throw out some names you can add to it if you want, but I feel like Tristan Castillo, Jordan Elliott, Christian Holmes, these are some guys who have been very verbal leaders and stretch lines and stuff like that. Anyone else stick out to you that you feel like has grabbed the reins of leadership?
Well, there's a number of guys, and I think the things in the secondary, I look at AC and Perkins, two guys that have played a lot of snaps, and they've really led on the back end, playing well. Bledsoe is a quiet leader, but has made impact plays. Cale Garrett is as good of a leader as we've got. And then, offensively, you named a couple of guys. Trev Sims, by the way that he plays, I think Kelly stepped in and done a great job on being a new guy, but also leading. And then Jonathan Johnson is as solid of a competitor as we've had.
And finally, Saturday, you get to put on the uniforms and have as close to the real thing as you can in spring.
Welcome back, welcome back, welcome back. It's our Hump Day edition on the Hill of Pat Jenkins Sports Day. It's our Wednesday edition here on the Hill of Pat Jenkins Sports Day, coming to you live on KDSJ 479, Monday through Friday from 1 to 2 p.m. But real quick, before we get on to our next stop on our EOTH caravan in the SEC, we want to give a shout out and show love to our sponsors, as this would not be possible without Lindsay and Associates, with an office location in Fayetteville, an office location also too in Rogers, the Baymont Hotel located at 735 South Shiloh Drive, Locomotion, it's located just below the Northwest Arkansas Mall, and lastly, our newest sponsor, Corey Beck's Custom Painting. Well, we told you we were on the bus, and the bus stopped in Como, but not South Carolina. This time, Columbia, Missouri, where we caught up with our good buddy, Cameron Teague of the Columbia Tribune. Cameron, welcome to the Hill, my man.
Thank you. Thanks for having me on.
Let's get off into it. Missouri football just finished up their third spring football season under Coach Barry Odom. Talk about some of the things that you came away with out of spring ball that you can kind of start gearing toward fall camp.
I learned a few things. I think one, obviously, is the big one everyone wants to know, is Kelly Bryant. I thought he looked good in the spring game. It's really hard to tell how good he is when he's going against a backup defense. But he seemed pretty calm, pretty accurate, very mobile, and very accurate on the run, which is definitely a change from Drew Lock last year. For as good as Drew was, he was more of the kind of stand in the pocket, power, huge arm,
right.
Really understood how to break down defenses. Kelly puts defenses in a different position just because of his legs. He can throw it or he can run it. So that was big. I thought Larry Roundtree looked really good. I think he'll probably be the most important player on the offense next year, just because of how talented he is. If he stays healthy, he could arguably be in for another 1,000-yard season. And then there's just a lot of weapons at receiver. I mean, they have so many receivers right now. I think they have 3 slot receivers who could start. Obviously, Jonathan Johnson is the guy you want to start because he's probably their most talented of the 3. But then Dom DeCinto had a good spring. Barrett Bannister was probably the most surprising. Probably had the best performance of the spring game. So there's a lot of talent on the offensive side.
It's funny you mentioned Cameron Barrett Bannister. He's a former Fayetteville High Bulldog, an alumni of my high school. So I'm quite familiar with the ability of Barrett. But when you look at this team, in your estimation, what do you think the strength will be? Something when Coach Odom and staff, sits down in the offseason, what do you think they'll say? They'll hang their hat on this particular position going into fall.
I think that's somewhere between. I think I think if you have to pick one, it's probably the run game. 'Cause I think Larry, like I said, I think Larry Roundtree is just really, really talented. I think he has a chance to be an all-SEC back this year, depending on how his season and everybody else's seasons work out. But they're going to ask him to do a lot. And then you look behind Larry, you have Tyler Beatty, who showed a lot of promise last year. For him, it's just building on that. And then Simi Bakari, who had a pretty good freshman year, wasn't asked to do too much because Tyler Beatty had a pretty good year. But if Larry or Tyler go down, Simi Bakari is going to be a third guy there. And he's capable of going out there and making plays as well. So I think it's the running backs, but I think very closely followed by the receivers. Like I said, I mean, they have so many guys they can throw out there for Kelly.
When you look at this team defensively, you lose a few of your defensive linemen to the draft that will be taking place tomorrow, but you still bring back a lot of experience. Talk about the expectation and I noticed we go back to several years when Coach Odom really took over the defensive play calling duties. Talk about just the culture that he was able to instill on that side of the ball, and what is the expectation level for what I think could be a very formidable defense in 2019?
Yeah, I think the expectation is to improve on last year. I mean, you bring a lot of guys back in the secondary. DeMarcus Basie, Adam Sparks, Christian Holmes, those are the guys who kind of hold down the defensive back spot. And those are three guys who got a lot of playing time last year. I think they think Jordan Elliott could be the best defensive tackle in Missouri history, and it's kind of crazy to think about that when you have guys like Sheldon Richardson who have been through here, and just all the talent that quote unquote D-line Zoo has had. I think he could be a stud this year. And then at linebacker, obviously Kel Garrett's back. You replace Terez Hall with Nick Bolton, who everyone loves Nick Bolton so far. So you have guys who can go in there and make plays. It's just a matter of what it all looks like together. I think the biggest question mark on the team is the defensive end slot. You lose a lot. You lose some guys there. Troy Williams is still indefinitely suspended, and you're just trying to find guys to fill in there. Trajan Jeffcoat is the guy you've heard a lot. Kill Byers, who will play inside and outside. There's a lot of Chris Turner is another name, but I think that's the biggest question mark. And then you look at the safeties down. I think as a whole, the defense has a lot of experience with it. Still a few question marks there on how you fill a few holes that left from last year.
Talking with Cameron Teague of the Columbia Tribune, covering the Mizzou Tigers for us here on the Hill Sports Talk with Pat Jenkins. Cameron, I want to talk to you about some of the younger guys. Early enrollment is something that's been real common here over the last few years with high school kids getting in, or junior college guys coming and enrolling, going through spring football. Out of some of the early enrollees that you guys, that Coach Odom was able to get in their first spring session, who stood out in your opinion in this year?
Good question. I'm not sure that any necessarily were just wowed you right away. I think the best part about spring session, I think a lot of people looked at Jelani Williams because he was one of their big guys out of St. Louis, but he didn't play in the spring game. I don't think Chris Sharon didn't play in the spring game. He was also a freshman who came down early. I think the big thing for them is it just gives them a chance to get to know the playbook and things of that nature going forward.
Good point.
Obviously gives them a leg up going into the fall camp as well. But I think a lot of people have a lot of high hopes for Jelani Williams, who's a 6'2" safety who, it was a big deal when he committed to Mizzou.
Talking with Cameron Teague of the Columbia Tribune, for those that have just tuned in to us on the Hill with Pat Jenkins Sports Talk Radio. Last question, Cameron, I want to ask you, and it's the $1 million question that everybody wants to know that's tuned in here is, with this team knowing, and this program and coaching staff knowing that there will be no bowl possibilities for this year, maybe next year, or however that's going to play out, what's been the general mood in that program, when you talk to Coach Odom about, staff and players?
It's almost like there is no sanction. I mean, they're playing the season out like they have a chance to win the SEC and get to an SEC championship game and get to a bowl game, which I think is the way you have to do that. Right now, the appeal is, they're appealing all the sanctions, so there's an option, there's a chance, if the appeal's not finished by the time football season's over, they could go to a bowl game because the appeal stays all the sanctions.
Great.
And then there's a very good chance that one, they could take the postseason ban away, or they could miss a bowl. So I think right now they're playing this season out like they have a chance to go to a pretty good bowl game and win the SEC. That's just the mood I've got. Now, if in the middle of the season that appeal comes back and the postseason ban is still on, and you're 8-9 games into the season, maybe the mood changes a little bit. But right now, I think they're going into the season like they're expecting to play in a bowl game.
Well, CT, I love your information. Expect to be a regular and welcome as a guest regularly here on OTH. But as always, my man, thanks for taking time out here on the Hill.
I appreciate it. Thanks for having me.
That was Cameron Teague of the Columbia Tribune covering the Mizzou Tigers for us here on the Hill. And Demetrius, what's your take on the Tigers? I mean, when we asked the question of the bowl ban, what do you take with that answer he just gave us?
I think that's really interesting. I think that really plays in Kelly Bryant's favor because, like I said, as of right now, I thought they were already banned, and that was already a done deal, all said and done. But I think with the opportunity, we know how politics works, and if you're winning in the right season, definitely. Say that one more time.
Politics in the end. Say, oops, did we say that?
Yeah, so I think that's gonna really be important, and I think that goes back to that battle line rivalry game. If these guys aren't, bowl banned, and it's Arkansas and Missouri, I think that's gonna be a huge game. I think the Arkansas fans are really gonna be rampant at that game. I think there's gonna be a lot of energy, and I think that could be one of the possible wins Arkansas needs to possibly get their potential bowl game. Just if you look at the schedule over the potential wins that they possibly could win, that's probably one that I have circled on that on the schedule.
I totally agree with Cameron. I mean, I think this Missouri team is going to be very, very potent offensively, really, really experienced defensively. And if I had a way too early sleeper like we had last year where I think both of us picked Kentucky, I'd have to say Missouri is the way too early sleeper in the East based on just the talent that they have. And he mentioned it at the tight end, wide receiver, running back. If they can get a quarterback, and Kelly Bryant, what better way, if you're Coach Oldham, would you want to lose Drew Lock to the NFL draft, first round, and then here comes Kelly Bryant as your replacement? I mean, can't get any better than that. And you have a team that, he's really changed the culture there in Columbia, Missouri. And it's a guy, he's played there. He bleeds black and gold. So you wouldn't expect anything less. But Demetrius, trying to get on our bus and head somewhere else. No telling where we'll end up tomorrow, but the caravan's got to go. We got to go put more gas in the tank so we can get this thing done for you. But before we go, I want to give a thank you to our guest, Cameron Teague of the Columbia Tribune, and Blake Topmeyer of the Knoxville News Centennial for coming on and talking Vols and Tigers. Until then, I want to give a thank you to my producer, Demetrius Demigod Johnson, but we all know him on here as what? My home guy. Our sponsors, Lindsay & Associates, with an office location in Fayetteville, an office location also too in Rogers. The Baymont Hotel, located at 735 South Shiloh Drive in Fayetteville. And Locomotion, it's located just below the Northwest Arkansas Mall. And lastly, our newest sponsor, Corey Beck's Custom Painting. That's going to do it for myself, for my producer, and for all you listeners. It's On the Hill with Pat Jenkins on KDSJ 479. You guys have a blessed one. Holla. Hey everyone, it's Pat Jenkins here of OTH. That's right, On the Hill with Pat Jenkins, Sports Talk Radio. We come to you each and every day here, Monday through Friday, from 1 to 2 on KDSJ 479. Be sure and tune in if you want to hear about SEC and the Arkansas Razorbacks. It's OTH. Holla.